Imagine hearing of a man who could command rivers, stop the rain, disappear at will, and even summon a golden throne from the heavens. A man whose words united rival kingdoms into one of Africa's most powerful empires. A man whose influence was so great that more than 300 years after his death, millions still speak his name with reverence. But here's the thing. This isn't merely a story of a man who could perform miracles. It's a story about politics, power, psychology, nation building, and perhaps one of the greatest acts of statecraft in African history. Because before there was the mighty Asante Empire, there was chaos, scattered kingdoms, endless rivalries, and a young spiritual leader who would change everything. This is the story of Okomfo Anokye. Long before he became one of the most famous figures in African history, Okomfo Anokye was simply a child. Or at least that's what everyone thought. The exact details of his birth remain a subject of debate even today. Different traditions across Ghana claim him as their own. But according to the most widely known Ekweapem tradition, Anokye was born around the year 1655 in the town of Awukogua. His parents were said to be Ano and Ya Anobia. From the moment he entered the world, people believed something was different about him. According to oral tradition, the newborn emerged, clutching a white cowtail whisk in one hand, while keeping the other tightly closed. No one could open the fist, not the midwife, nor his mother. Finally, his father managed to pry it open. Inside was said to be a mysterious talisman. The new infant then looked directly at his father and spoke. Ano, che, meaning Ano, see. This gave rise to his name, Anokye. Whether the story is literally true isn't really the point. Stories like these shaped how people saw him. Long before he ever led a nation, Anokye had already become a person people believed was chosen for something extraordinary. As he grew older, stories of his unusual abilities followed him everywhere. Local traditions claimed he performed feats that defied explanation. Some say he carved an oware board into stone with his fingers. Others claim he climbed a palm tree while wearing sandals and simultaneously leaving footprints in the tree's trunks. Even today, sites associated with these stories are shown to visitors in Awukogua. As he grew older, his reputation spread far beyond his hometown. He became known not simply as Anokye, but as Okomfo Anokye. Okomfo being the Akan title for a traditional priest and spiritual intermediary. It was a title earned through his mastery of ritual divination and traditional knowledge. Long before he advised kings, people were already seeking his counsel. But while the miracles dominate popular memory, historians point to something equally important. Anokye grew up in a region known for spiritual learning, herbal medicine, diplomacy, and traditional knowledge. He wasn't just becoming a priest. He was becoming an intellectual. And soon, destiny would place him in the path of a king. In the late 17th century, the most powerful state in the region wasn't Asante. It was Denkyira. Denkyira controlled trade routes, collected tributes, and dominated many neighboring states. Among those subordinate states was a small kingdom called Kweman. Today, we know this kingdom as Kumasi. But at the time, it was only one player among many. The future ruler of Kweman was a young royal named Osei Tutu. Like Anokye, Osei Tutu's early life is surrounded by competing accounts. But most traditions agree on one thing. At some point, he found himself away from home. Some accounts place him in the court of Denkyira. Others place him in Ekwamu. Wherever the meeting occurred, it was here that two remarkable individuals encountered one another. Osei Tutu possessed charisma, military ambition, political instincts. Anokye possessed spiritual authority, strategic intelligence, and an extraordinary ability to inspire belief. Separately, each man was influential. Together, they became unstoppable. Historians often describe their partnership as one of the most important political alliances in African history. Each supplied what the other lacked. One had the sword, the other, the vision. To understand what happened next, we need to understand the political landscape at the time. The Akan forest region was fragmented. Many states shared language, customs, and ancestry. Yet they remained divided. Each had its own chief, its own traditions, its own interests, and its own rivalries. The division made them vulnerable. Denkyira exploited those divisions and maintained dominance over the region. Tributes flowed south. Authority flowed north. For years, local rulers tolerated the arrangement. That was until a new Denkyira king came to power, Intim Jakari. Intim's demands are said to have crossed a line. Imagine you're a farmer in one of those northern states. You've spent months digging for gold in nearby streams, only to watch much of it leave your homeland as tribute. Your chief must travel south, not as an equal, but to pay homage to another king. Perhaps a young prince from your community is sent away to Denkyira's courts to act as a political hostage, a guarantee that your rulers remain loyal. You may never meet the king of Denkyira, but his power reaches your village all the same. To many of the northern chiefs, these were no longer the demands of an overlord. They had become the demands of a ruler who believed they had completely lost their dignity. What had once been dominance now felt like degradation. And there's only so much degradation a people can take before rebellion begins to brew in their minds. But rebellion posed a problem. No single state could defeat Denkyira alone. The forest states needed unity. But unity was something they had never achieved. This was the challenge Okomfo Anokye set out to solve. Many leaders can gather an army. Far fewer can create a nation. Anokye understood something profound. People rarely fight and die for political systems. They fight for ideas, for identity, for belief. But belief is difficult. You cannot simply command people to believe. You have to give them something worth believing in. So instead of merely building an alliance, he began building a shared consciousness. One by one, states joined the coalition. Kumasi, Mampong, Bekwai, Insuta, Kumeu, and others. Military cooperation emerged. Political agreements were forged. But Anokye knew agreements alone were fragile. The chiefs needed a symbol that transcended individual loyalties, a symbol greater than any single ruler. And according to Asante tradition, that symbol arrived from heaven itself. Few events in Ghanaian history are as famous as the coming of the Golden Stool. The chiefs of the newfound coalition gathered in Kumasi. The future of the alliance hung in the balance. Anokye stepped forward. He entered into a spiritual trance. The atmosphere grew tense. Then came thunder, dark clouds, and swirling dusts. As the assembled leaders watched, a golden stool descended from the sky. Slowly, gracefully, until it settled on the knees of Osei Tutu. The crowd was stunned. Anokye then made a declaration that would shape centuries of history. The stool, he said, was not the property of a king. It was the soul of the nation, the living embodiment of all Asante people, past, present, and future. This was revolutionary. Most kingdoms believed to kings. The Golden Stool belonged to the nation. A new identity had been born. No more Kumasi by itself. No more Mampong by itself. No more Bekwai by itself. Asante. One people. One destiny. One soul. And suddenly, rebellion against Denkyira felt possible. Now, not everyone believes the Golden Stool literally descended from heaven. Some historians have suggested a far more earthly explanation. They argue that Anokye may have staged the event using hidden ropes, elevated platforms, or other forms of theatrical illusion. Not to deceive for deception's sake, but to accomplish something much bigger. To convince rival chiefs that this new nation possessed divine approval. Whether that theory is true, we'll probably never know. What we do know, however, is that it worked. Because after that day, the Golden Stool became the single most powerful symbol of Asante identity. Whether one views the event as miracle, symbolism, or political theater, its impact was long-lasting. The conflict that followed will determine the future of the region. Denkyira remained powerful, experienced, confident. Its leaders expected another easy victory. Instead, they encountered something new, a united enemy. Asante forces marched under a single command. Osei Tutu led militarily. Anokye inspired spiritually. Throughout the campaign, stories spread of Anokye's supernatural interventions. War medicines, prophecies, protective rituals, public demonstrations designed to reassure Asante warriors and intimidate their opponents. Whether literal or psychological, these actions mattered. Because morale wins wars, confidence wins battles, and belief changes outcomes. In 1701, the decisive confrontation arrived at Feyiase. The Battle of Feyiase would become one of the most important turning points in Asante's story. When the fighting ended, Denkyira had fallen. A new empire emerged. The Asante Empire was born. And at its center stood the partnership of Osei Tutu and Okomfo Anokye. For the first time in documented history, the forest states had defeated the power that had dominated them for generations. The celebrations must have been immense. But while everyone else celebrated victory, Anokye was already thinking about the next battle. Not against Denkyira, but against something far more dangerous: human nature. Winning a war is difficult. Keeping the peace afterwards is even harder. History is full of kingdoms that defeated a common enemy, only to turn on one another once the celebrations ended. Okomfo Anokye knew that. He understood something that many conquerors never do. An empire doesn't collapse because it loses battles. It collapses because power becomes concentrated in the wrong hands. Perhaps rival chiefs begin competing again. Perhaps justice becomes selective. And before you know it, today's liberator slowly morphs into tomorrow's tyrant. If Asante was going to survive, it needed something stronger than armies. It needed institutions. Tradition credits Okomfo Anokye with laying the constitutional foundations of the new state. Not in the modern sense of writing a constitution on paper, but by creating customs, laws, offices, and rituals that everyone understood and respected. These rules became the invisible framework holding the empire together. The first principle was simple. Power had to be centralized, but never completely unchecked. The Asantehene became the supreme ruler of the empire. He commanded the army, settled major disputes, and represented the entire nation. But contrary to what many would imagine, he was never supposed to rule alone. His authority came from the Golden Stool, not the other way around. This was a subtle but revolutionary idea. The king did not own the kingdom. He served it. The Golden Stool represented the soul of the Asante nation, meaning that even the king was ultimately accountable to something greater than himself. That distinction may sound symbolic, but politically, it was brilliant. It separated the office from the individual. A bad king could be removed, and the nation would still remain. Imagine a king nobody can say no to. History shows that's usually where things begin to go wrong. The Asante political system tried to solve that problem before it even ever began. Enter the Queen Mother, the Ohema. In many monarchies around the world, queens played ceremonial roles. Not here. Within the Asante political system, the Ohema possessed genuine constitutional authority. She advised the king, corrected him, criticized him, and perhaps most importantly, she played a decisive role in choosing who became king in the first place. If a ruler became arrogant, ignored custom, or endangered the welfare of his people, the Queen Mother could openly challenge him before the Council of Chiefs. Sorry. Power, in other words, always had someone watching it. The Council of Chiefs themselves also formed another layer of accountability. When the various states joined the union, they did not surrender everything. They still governed their own towns, managed local disputes, protected their traditions, and collected local revenue. This meant Kumasi could not simply dictate every decision across the empire. Instead, government became something of a partnership. The central government handled matters affecting the entire empire, while local rulers retained authority over their own communities. It was a balance between unity and local independence, remarkably similar to what we would now call a federal system. Not the same, definitely not the same, but similar. Justice also changed. Before the union, conflicts between families or clans often led to cycles of revenge. One killing invited another, then another. Blood debts could continue for generations without end. A united empire could not function like that. So judicial authority increasingly shifted towards the central state. Rather than every family seeking revenge for itself, serious crimes became matters for the kingdom. Justice was no longer purely personal. It became institutional. That may sound dramatic, but it fundamentally changed how society functioned. Tradition also attributes to Anokye a body of laws and customs, often referred to as the 77 laws, that governed every aspect of life. Whether every one of these laws can be historically verified remains a matter of debate. But what matters is the broader principle they represented. Government was expected to extend beyond war. In everyday life, marriage, inheritance, public behavior, ceremonies, leadership, even sanitation. The message was clear. An empire wasn't held together by soldiers alone. It was held together by shared expectation. Everyone, from king to ordinary farmer, was expected to know where the boundaries were. Perhaps Anokye's greatest political achievement wasn't giving people more power. It was giving everyone limits. The king had limits. The chiefs had limits. Priests had limits. Even sacred traditions had procedures that had to be followed. In many ways, this was an early recognition of an idea that political philosophers still argue today. Power is safest when no single person can exercise it without restraint. And maybe that explains why the Asante Empire proved so remarkably durable. Empires built around extraordinary individuals typically disappear when those individuals die. But institutions outlive people. Osei Tutu would eventually die. So would Okomfo Anokye. Yet the system they helped create endured for generations. Long after the founders were gone, the Golden Stool remained the ultimate source of legitimacy. Kings came and went. Chiefs rose and fell. But the institutions survived because the people believed they were custodians of something far greater than themselves. And perhaps that is Okomfo Anokye's greatest legacy. Not simply that he built an empire, but that he helped build one that knew how to govern itself. As the empire grew, so did the legends. Stories spread across the land. One told of a sword driven into the earth in Kumasi. Anokye reportedly declared that no one would ever remove it. When the British eventually occupied Kumasi, they reportedly tried to remove the sword. Soldiers pulled. Engineers dug around it. Some accounts even claim machinery was brought in. But nothing worked. The sword refused to move. Whether history or folklore, every failed attempt only strengthened the belief that Anokye's prophecy still held. Centuries later, the sword remains a celebrated symbol. Anokye is also said to have made another astounding prophecy. He declared that one day, the very spot where the sword stood would become the place where countless people would find healing. At the time, that prophecy would have sounded almost impossible. There were no hospitals, no medical schools, no modern surgery. Yet today, that exact site is home to the Okomfo Anokye Teaching Hospital, one of the largest referral hospitals in Ghana. To believers, it's proof of Anokye's prophetic gift. To skeptics, it's an extraordinary coincidence. Either way, every story continues to shape how generations remember him. Another story claimed he controlled storms. Others said he predicted events before they happened. Today, historians debate these accounts. Believers see evidence of supernatural power. Skeptics see symbolic stories that reinforced authority. But regardless of interpretation, the result was the same. The stories amplified his influence. And influence is one of history's most powerful forces. Of all the legends surrounding Anokye, None is more fascinating than the story of his final journey. According to Asante tradition, Anokye became troubled by humanity's greatest suffering, death. He wanted to find a cure, a medicine that could free people from the pain of losing loved ones. So he made an announcement. He would enter into a death-like trance for 7 years and 7 days. During that time, no one was to mourn. No funerals, no loud lamentations, no disturbances. If these instructions were obeyed, he would return with the antidote to death itself. Then he lay down and entered into the trance. Years passed, silence remained, until greed intervened. As the story goes, a relative named Xiao grew impatient, believing Anokye would never return, and perhaps eager to inherit Anokye's wealth. He organized funeral rites. The noise broke the sacred conditions. The path back was lost. And with that, humanity lost its chance. The cure for death would never return. But that wasn't quite the end. Sometime after the funeral, a hunter traveling through the forest is said to have encountered Anokye. Not in the flesh, but in his spiritual form. The stunned hunter reportedly fell to his knees. Anokye handed him a powerful medicine known as Nkotrema. It's said to bring prosperity and protection. Then he delivered one final message. The cure for death had been found. But because his instructions had been broken, humanity would never receive it. And with those words, he vanished forever. Today, more than 3 centuries after his death, Okomfo Anokye remains one of the most influential figures in African history. Not because everyone agrees about the miracles, not because every story can be verified, but because the nation he helped create endured. Empires rose and fell. Colonial powers arrived. Wars were fought. Governments changed. Yet, the legacy survived. The Golden Stool still stands today as one of the most powerful symbols in Africa. The Asante Kingdom still exists. And the name Okomfo Anokye still echoes through Ghanaian history. Perhaps his most impressive feat was not summoning a stool from the sky. Perhaps it was that he convinced dozens of rival kingdoms to see themselves as one people, and in so doing, performed the greatest miracle of all.